Good afternoon, everyone. How many of you have already listened to April and Mark talk this week? Okay. See, everyone. We're here today to talk about what's affectionately known as the Pet Resource Center or Pet Support Center, Pet Support Network. How many of you have one of these in place in some version? Okay. I wanted to start off talking about data. You've heard it mentioned several times already this week. What we're looking at here is intakes by zip code from 2 different communities in 2 different states, 2 different sizes. And the thing that strikes me as absolutely amazing is that in both cases, roughly half of the intake is coming from about 10 to 15% of the zip codes. So on the left you have, what is that? What's C? City of Austin. I'm used to seeing AAC. So City of Austin, where you have 74 zip codes that they service. And the majority of their impounds are coming from 9 zip codes, what were the stats you said earlier today, as far as the area and, do you remember?
Yeah, so the 9 zip codes that comprise over 50% of our overall dog intake, they also make up about 26% of our land area. So we serve a 900 square mile jurisdiction, and these zip codes make up 26% of that.
And then on the right-hand side, you have Pima County, where we serve 67 zip codes, and half of our intake comes from 7 of them. Because I work at Pima County, I'm going to go into that in a little detail. And probably everyone's tired of hearing about Austin, right?
I'm not.
You can throw things at me, it's fine, it's on video. So what we did is a couple different ways that we looked at our data in Pima. The map that you see on the left-hand side there is, it's a resource map. So all of the little red plus signs are veterinary hospitals, veterinarians, places where people can seek medical care for their pets. All of the blue icons with the paw print, those are all pet stores. PetSmart, Petco, your mom and pop store, places where people are going to be able to get grain-free dog food, let's say. Then all of the yellow circles, it looks like they have groceries in them. It looks like actually milk and a soda. Those are all of the retail stores that offer some pet supplies. So I don't know what they are here. Vons, Safeway, Albertsons. Places where you're likely to be able to get pet food, although it may not be the most affordable and it may not be the best quality. On the right-hand side, you have what we used. We worked with our GIS department and we made a heat map of our intake. So the yellow areas are where the majority of the intakes are coming from. 4 of those zip codes happen to be 4 of the ones in the first pie chart, where we're getting 25% of our intake. And if you look, the map, the resource map, those zip codes are outlined in yellow, and people don't have options there. They're resource deserts. Is there anyone who's familiar with that term, resource deserts? They have them for people supplies as well and medical care. So we determined we were going to dig really deep into these 4 zip codes and figure out what we could offer and what could we do. We looked at income. These 4 highest intake zip codes, 5, 6, 13, 14, they all have roughly 50 to 60% of the average or the median income for Pima County. And research has shown that people living in areas that are underserved, where they don't have resources and they have lower income, don't often make poor decisions out of choice. They make them because they don't have options. They can't afford to go to the vet. They can't afford to get grain-free food. They can't, that even if they're reduced cost options for them, they're sometimes unattainable. We looked at all of the activities our field officers were responding to in these areas. The middle section, the green bars, those are stray animals, leash law violations. So a lot of animals in these areas just aren't staying at home. Those are the ones that often end up hit by a car. Somebody finds them, brings them into the shelter. People don't have the resources to fix their fence. They don't have the resources to get a spring for their gate their kid leaves open. We looked at euthanasia rates and return to owner rates in these areas. In these 4 zip codes, people's pets are almost twice as likely to be euthanized in the shelter than returned to their families. We haven't quite figured out why. The initial kind of dig into that is that these people don't have the resources to provide medical care early on when their animals are first injured or first sick. So by the time they get to us, things are really, really dire, and there's little option. I'm going to let April jump in.
That's my slide.
Hey!
How about that? So one of the things that we recently implemented in our Pet Resource Center is, like Pima, we really want to know. We wanted to know a whole lot of things when we were starting to think about the transition to a Pet Resource Center as opposed to a transactional intake model. We wanted to know where our animals are coming from, and so we too did a deep dive into our data to identify our areas, and we tried to identify the main drivers around owner relinquishments and whether or not we were resourced to pair people with the tools or the supplies that they needed to promote that and protect that human-animal bond and send those animals back home with their humans. But what we also knew is that 70% of our dog intake came in as strays, and we didn't really know much about how they ended up at our shelter. We made lots of assumptions, so we decided what we didn't know, we were just going to ask. And so we've started surveying folks as they come to our shelter and asking them things like, where'd you find this pet? Did you find it in your neighborhood? If you had adequate resources, would you be willing to keep it? And we know that pets, when they're found in their neighborhoods, they're more likely to go back home again if they stay in their neighborhoods. So one of the things we want to encourage, and one of the main focuses of our pet resource program right now, is we want to focus on building out resources for our stray pet finders, because that is the largest population of animals entering our facility. And once they're entering our facility, they're just getting stuck. We know that we're not getting them home again. And so our best chance of reuniting that pet with its family is by sending it back with that finder, who we can assume is already trying to make the right choice by that animal by bringing it to a place that they perceive as a safe place for the animal. And so as part of this survey, we wanted to know what they had already done to try to reconnect that pet back with their family, because certainly we don't want to spin our wheels trying to connect them with resources that they're already tapped into. We want to build our programs, and we want to spend our time trying to connect them to resources that they don't already have connection to just as a community member. So we use the survey responses and what we learned from them to inform our decisions. Now, like I said, we just started this survey related to stray animal intake, but we're not strangers to surveying our communities. And my neighborhood level program team spent some time surveying areas that we had experienced significant animal intake from, and we had experienced a significant call volume from with animal protection. And the information we learned from those surveys informed how we grew programs or changed practices or changed policies with our animal protection group, our outreach group, and how we built programs and ideas around our transition to the Pet Resource Center.
If it hasn't been ingrained in your head yet, data, 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 data. So the challenges that we face in Austin and in Tucson are not unique. Many of you probably have similar challenges. These are national issues. In areas of underserved communities, your spay and neuter rates drop from between 80-90% to between 10 and 15%. And it's not because the options aren't there. You may have heard April or Mark talk about at some point already that they've been offering spay and neuter options in communities that are underserved once a week for years. And those areas are still some of the highest intake areas. So that is a piece, but that's not going to fix everything. In these communities, the percentage of pet owners who have seen a vet is like 30%. The percentage of people that have contacted animal services of their own is about 15%. Why do we think that is? Because they think they're going to get in trouble, right? They think we're going to penalize them, we're going to write them tickets, we're going to take their pets. They don't see us as a resource, they don't see us as a partner. What we've done in Pima is really reached out to those communities. We've developed some programs, some of which you may already be doing or you may have heard of. We're offering fencing assistance. We're doing vaccine clinics and wellness checks and microchip clinics. We're providing food. We're providing dishes. One of our programs that we came up with, or that we started, actually started with providing like boots for the dogs so they don't burn their feet on the asphalt. And from that, we got inroads with people that are facing homelessness, people that are using other social services, and learned that one of their problems with getting their pets water is that they don't have dishes, and they don't want bulky stainless steel dishes because they can't carry them. So we started purchasing and getting donations of collapsible bowls, the silicone ones, because they clip onto something they're already carrying, they're not heavy. This picture on the right-hand side, this is a dog that was well beloved by the family. They had a dog house. This little girl loved her dog, but they didn't have any kind of shade, they didn't have any cover, so we brought them a tarp. Like, it may not be the ideal, perfect situation. It's not the white picket fence and the 2.5 kids, but this dog is loved and he's a member of their family, and they now pretty much exceed like the minimum requirements that we have in Tucson. You want to talk about things that you guys offer in Austin? Mark
yeah, we
does?
certainly can. Do you want to?
One of the things that we do similar things. You know, we have dog houses that are available if people need them. As I mentioned in the class before this, my expectation with my officers is if somebody needs a dog house, we don't tell them to come to the center and get it, we take it to them. A lot of these people, they're already in a situation where they can't get what they need. They may not have the means. They might be using public transportation, kind of hard to haul a dog house on a bus. They can't transport their animals on the bus. So we have to figure out ways around that. And so one of those things is, like I said, you know, my officers, if they know somebody needs a dog house, come back to the shelter, grab one, and take it right back out there. We don't need to wait. We don't need to have somebody else do it. We don't need to have another person involved when we can just go ahead and do it. And it's the same thing with crates. Fencing's a little bit different because it takes a little bit more to do, so that's done through a fencing officer. But again, if we can help these people be successful with their pets and they don't get loose in the first place, then we don't have to have the resource center for people turning in the pets. One of the things I'll say that, you know, with the data, this most recent study or this survey they've been doing, we're going to be able to use some of that same information in field services with the APOs so we can understand these animals are coming in over the counter. We've long wondered who's bringing them in and why. And as April said, they mean to do well by the animal, but if we can figure out what communities they're coming out of the most, and we know that it's people in those communities that are bringing them out, we can engage that community then to get them back home and to help them stay home. So one of the resources I mentioned using at the last session was Nextdoor. Some of these communities don't have Nextdoor, but they have somebody in the community that knows everybody, that knows whose dogs do what or whose kids are doing what. So sometimes we got to find that person, and that's what my animal protection officers are supposed to be doing, and that's why they're in the same place for 6 months at a time. So we can kind of help locate some of those resources within that community that we might not recognize as a traditional resource, but they're there. You know, you might have that community grandmother that just likes helping people or likes knowing what's going on. So
It's like next door of the 70s.
right, word of
Right?
mouth,
Like people
rumors.
actually knew their neighbors.
Right. And that is a different thing. You know, some of these neighborhoods you go to and you walk down the street, April and I found this when we were canvassing a couple of years ago, people sit out in the front yards and they talk to each other. They sit on the porch, they know who's in their neighborhood and they know who shouldn't be in their neighborhood. You know, it's not that urban community where they're pulling in a garage and going in for the night.
Another thing that we do in Pima is we've tried to align ourselves with many of the social services organizations, the Mission, Primavera Foundation, which operates a couple of transitional shelters. And then there's an organization or a facility called Z Mansion, which is actually like a wedding venue. And on Saturday mornings, they open up their property and they have nurse practitioners and human food pantry and housing assistants and different representatives from like WIC or whatever the other, I can't think of any other human programs right now. SNAP. Those people are already gathering together and have one place where they're offering services. And so we've partnered ourselves up with them so that we're present and we're also offering pet food and pet bowls and vaccines and microchips and collars and leashes and whatever things that we have. And a lot of those visitors are coming every week or every other week. And so we're developing relationships with them and starting to kind of create inroads into those communities. One of the big questions that we got, I think, from our previous session was, how do you fund this? Like, where do you start? What if you want this program, but you don't have anything? The most important thing, I think, to the people that run your cities and counties is money, right? So there's several studies. This one, I think, seemed the most accurate to me, that Salt Lake City Animal Services found providing support to keep the animal in a home is about $116. The cost to bring that animal in and shelter it is over $400. Now, if you are in an organization where you can adopt out your dogs for $400, great. I don't work in one of those.
Nor do we.
So one of the things the three of us kind of talked about is getting that initial sort of seed money to start the program, and then using your successes of that money to keep funding your program. I don't remember, Mark, if it was you or if it was Bennett that was telling me there's an organization that started, they started a program like this, and I can't remember who it was. They started with $20,000 donation. And they said, we're going to blow through this so quickly. And they started using it to support medical care. They started using it to support fencing. They started using it to support ways to help owners solve problems. And they shared their stories. They talked about their successes. They took pictures at these things. And it seems very awkward. We struggle, I don't know if you guys do, but we struggle in Pima with getting like our field officers to take pictures of people's like yards with their dog and things. But at the end of a year, this organization had more than $20,000 because people want to support successes. They want to support programs that make a difference. They want to feel that their money is impacting things positively. I don't know what's next. Did I break it? Another thing that we talk about a lot is returning animals to owners or keeping them at their homes. Nationally, underserved neighborhoods are getting pets from people they already know, from their friends, from their family, from their neighbors. The stray that's been running around for 2 weeks, they decide to take it in. So when you go out and you take their pet from them, or their dog's running around as a stray, and you take it into the shelter and you create this barrier for it to go back because the owner can't ride the bus or can't make it across town, they go and get another dog. It doesn't actually solve the problem. And so one of the things that Austin and Pima have in common, and probably some of you as well, is we really try to get at conversations and not just, oh, your dog's a stray, I got to pick it up. That's the rules.
So one thing I kind of wanted to point out, and for those of you that have already heard Mark and I give our presentations over the past day or two, you probably already heard this, but it's worth repeating. The reason these programs matter, and the reason this engagement-based approach to delivering community services matters is because in order to sustain no-kill in our communities, we have to be able to position ourselves to only shelter those pets in our community that are in greatest need, and then we have to be able to ensure outcomes outpace our intakes. So if we can engage and empower our community members, like our stray pet finders who are already interested in doing the right thing, if we can engage them around programs like being a lifesaver or being a pet's hero for the day by taking it back home to its owner after we've been able to connect them through a microchip or a tag, then that's one animal that never had to enter our system. We have a community member that has, because of their role in reuniting that pet with the owner, has increased our capacity to care for those in greatest need within our shelter. And so I think we can probably all agree that we never have all the resources we need to operate to the optimal level that we'd like to. And so even if it's one animal that makes it back home or two animals that make it back home, that relieves the shelter of some resources and builds that capacity not only internally, but it builds capacity in your community because you're sharing information, you're resetting the expectation with your community members around what doing right by that animal looks like. When a pet finder finds an animal, it doesn't mean take it to the shelter. It means keep it in my home and post it on Facebook and post flyers in my neighborhood. And so we spend a whole lot of our time in Austin building out our community-facing programs because at our point in our no-kill path, we know that sustaining no-kill in our community exists outside of our shelter walls. So what these pictures represent, at least for Austin, are opportunities that we took to engage and empower our community and being our partners in life-saving. And we did that through the programs that we created that connect either stray pet finders with the resources they need to help that animal get back home, or connecting our pet owners that really didn't need pet sheltering services with the things they needed to work through whatever acute crisis they were facing that was potentially disrupting their human-animal bond.
How many people in this room are currently working with a municipal shelter or a nonprofit that has a contract? About half, a little more than half. How many of you have some kind of a program where you encourage finders to either foster pets or keep them at their house or take them back to their house? About 25%. In Pima, we're getting ready to pilot a finder to foster program where not only are we encouraging people to take their pets that they found back to their house, but we're also going to give them a whole bunch of stuff. We're going to give them a crate, we're going to give them some food, we're going to give them a leash, whatever the thing is that they need to make that work in their house, because ultimately that's cheaper, and the pet has a like 3 times higher chance of going back home, just because it stays where it was found. So we talk a little bit about tell your story. If you've heard Kristen speak at all this weekend, she talks about being transparent and shining the light into the dark places. I think definitely pet support and these resources is kind of a dark spot that some people will shy away from. There's potentially fear that if I'm talking about returning a pet to a home that isn't the perfect home, am I going to get some kind of negative feedback from my community, from my supporters? But as we've mentioned, the more you share the story and the more successful it is, the more supporters you have. I think Austin's really good at sharing their stories.
Well, I was going to say, and if you're good at sharing your story, and we do struggle with it, if you're busy telling the good things you're doing, and like, when we have our weekly meetings, Pet Resource Center tells everybody how many deferrals they've had. We all give a little status update, but to the public, you drown out those squeaky wheels that are the problem children that aren't, because you're not sending that dog back to the perfect home, or you gave that dog back to the homeless person that they don't think should own a dog. And you drown them out and you make them irrelevant because of all the positive things you're doing. When to me, rolling up on a homeless guy that's now out of jail or out of the hospital or whatever and giving him his little dog back and seeing the joy in his eyes, that's worth all of it to me right there. There's a story here, we used to deal with a guy, his dog would come to the shelter so often, he just made camp down the street from the shelter. He's recently gone missing. We don't know where he is, but we ended up with his dog. But myself and 3 other animal protection officers have driven around the city trying to find out where this guy is. And people that know him, when we rolled up on him, they're like, no, we don't know where he is, but we'll take his dog, don't hurt his dog. So they know we're taking care of his dog. But I don't care about the naysayers about that, because I know how much he loved his dog. And I know how much the other people, whether it's a dog in a backyard under a tarp or maybe not the greatest dog house, I know they love their dog. And what would I want to have happen if it was my dog? And I'll pose that question to people. What if it was your dog? What would you want to have happen? I would want it back in the neighborhood where I might have a chance of getting it back. I would want it taken care of by somebody that can give it love and attention. And that's where, when you send a dog home with somebody, if it's the finder, like April said, we know they care about this animal, or they wouldn't have brought it to us in the first place. And those people sometimes will give it the best love and attention that is not going to get in the municipal shelter. Plus, it's probably not going to get exposed to diseases that we all have. So there's a ton of benefits of having this happen. And then if they don't find the dog owner, they have the chance to either adopt that animal out as a foster, or they can keep the dog. So either way, it's a win, and we're not dealing with it. We're not. The few supplies you give them up front is far cheaper than having to intake that animal.
In the story?
Yeah, and I just will add, one of the other really key things about telling your story and telling it often is it gives you the opportunity to reset expectations with your community about what you need and how you need them to partner with you and how you want to partner with them. So
Austin's been really good about this, and I've heard April mention it like 100 times in the last 2 hours. And one of the things that I always wonder is, well, how do you do that? Where do you start, right? She told me, telling a story about how they used to go out on calls for snakes and then realized that that wasn't a huge benefit. It wasn't something they were mandated to do, but it was something they were expected to do. And how they had to change the community's mindset of that. So where do you start with that? I put you on the spot.
No, I appreciate that. And
when you need to change the community's expectations.
And just to clarify, the snake story, we actually stopped doing that because there wasn't any value in it in our community. So it wasn't something that our community necessarily wanted us to be doing.
But they expected you to, in some level?
Well, so
This is what I get for putting her on the spot. She's going to say I'm wrong.
got to clarify, right? No, so with our field services program, when we transitioned from a punitive program to one that was engagement-based, we spent a lot of time asking why. Why are we doing these things? Are they mandated? Do they hold some sort of community value? Are we doing them because they're an internal policy? Are we doing them because we've always done them? What value is it bringing to our organization right now? And is it something we should be doing? And so when we began transitioning our intake department from one that was largely transactional to one that was engagement-based, and we were seeking to have conversations with our community members and seeking to partner with our community members in resolving all the various animal-related issues that they face, we asked ourselves why. Like, what are we trying to accomplish in our service delivery within this team? And so for us, what it started with, and I've got my pet resource supervisor here staring at me, I can see her. What it started with was just resetting expectations with our staff, that we were going to have open dialogue and meaningful conversations with our community members. So it just started with dialogue for us. And instead of telling our community members what they needed, or assuming that we knew what service was going to best fit their situation, we started letting them tell us their story. And then we started helping them problem solve through whatever they were facing. Am I right, Wendy?
So first steps is not just communicating to your community what the new expectation is, but talking with your staff. Telling the story, telling your goals, telling your vision internally as well as externally. This is just more cute pictures we had to throw in. And some more cute pictures we had to throw in. I kind of just kept pulling pictures, and I was like, we got to use this, we got to use this, we got to use this, and then kind of ran out of places to use them. So there's probably a lot of questions.
Hi. What do you guys do for like really serious injuries if they're owned animals? Do you offer any services for that kind of thing, like HBC or serious, heart conditions, things that need serious medical care?
I can speak to what we do, and then you guys can probably have something different. Our mantra for our clinic is we don't treat owned pets. Which is weird because, as April pointed out to me earlier, all the pets that we treat are owned. So that kind of been deflated. I have to come up with something new now. In Pima, we're down half of our vets. We're seeing roughly 17,000 animals a year with 2 vets. And I feel like we have an enormously large percentage of pets that come in that are hit by car. So we have anything that's brought to us, we will treat immediately to stop bleeding, make it comfortable, like something that's really triaging a situation. And then while we're doing that, we'll be having a conversation of, can you afford medical care? What are your options? How did you get here? Is this your pet? We're lucky enough that we have an amazing friends group, and we started our pet support with a grant from PetSmart charities that enabled us to start building relationships with veterinarians in the community and to offer a small percentage of assistance for medical issues. We were initially limited to like $250, and you had to spay or neuter your pet, and it had to be licensed, and it had to this, that, the other thing. And Part of the reason for those restrictions, this is going to be a really long answer to your question, sorry, very indirect. Part of the reason for that is because we wanted that money to last as long as possible, and we kind of were afraid it was going to run out if we started helping everyone. And it did run out, and we shared our stories about it, and we now have private donors that have kicked in large chunks of money to our friends group specifically for these issues. So we've recently gone through and kind of expanded what our qualifications are to receive assistance for medical. Our sort of frontline staff is able to assist with about $500 worth of medical care. If they want to go over that, then a supervisor will can approve it. So I've approved up to $2,000. Typically, in like an emergency hit by car situation, if an owner shows up on our door with their lateral dog, we triage as much as we can, have this conversation, find out, can you transport this dog to your personal vet or an outside vet? Can you afford to pay bills? Can we make sure that this pet is going to be taken care of? If not, then the pet stays with us, and then it's kind of at our vet's discretion if the pet goes back or not. I would never advertise that, yes, bring all of your injured pets to us and we'll care for them and give them back to you, but really I don't want them to stay with us. So that's why those conversations are important, because sometimes if you can get the pet through like that emergency first 24 hours or 48 hours till they're stable, then at that point sometimes pet parents can take over. Sometimes they can't until really like the dog's just on like some pain meds. So having those conversations is really, really important. And like I said, that was a really long answer, way about getting to the answer the question. You guys can talk about what you do.
Oh, okay.
I give you permission.
I appreciate that. So with Austin, and I'm just going to talk primarily about the animals that come into our Pet Resource Center. Certainly if they come in and they are in need of immediate medical care, we're going to bring in our vet tech team and we're going to ask for some initial triage. Like if an animal is so critical that we're worried that it's going to crash, we're going to go ahead and put hands on and try to help. And then we're going to have the conversation about where did this animal come from? Is it yours, etc. Excuse me. But if the animal's not critical, if he's stable, he may be broken, but if he's stable, we're going to have a conversation, and particularly if it's an owned animal, we're going to do our best to get that pet owner to get that pet to a private vet so that they can make the decisions, an informed decision around that pet's needs. We'll support them to a degree. We also work with the Friends of group that has a subgroup that is primarily focused on helping us promote retention. And so we can use $250, $500 vouchers to connect people to a vet clinic so that they can get that initial exam and triage done, and they can make the decisions from there, what the next steps need to be for them and their family. If we have time, we're also going to talk to them about things like care credit and other options or avenues for raising money if they're a bit tight on funds. And we try to use our low-cost vet clinics as often as possible, try to direct folks there. We do have a clinic in Austin that will provide services on a sliding scale. And I don't know if they do it any longer, but I do know that there are clinics that are certainly open to monthly payments and things like that. So those are conversations that we try to have with our pet owners, and we really, if it's an owned pet, we really want to let that pet owner make that decision around that animal in that acute crisis moment. Does that help?
Her answer was much briefer than mine.
I just wanted to validate, some of what you said. So we're a brand new 1-year-old 501c3 intervention prevention partnered with our animal services, which was second highest euthanasia in Illinois. And we started with one vaccine licensing microchip clinic and $1,500, and that's it. And we've raised in our first year $72,000. Thank you. And all through PayPal link on our Facebook page and sharing the stories and the videos of seeing pets reunited with their owners or staying with their owners and them seeing the love. And it really, we have not had, I don't think, one person really have an objection to that family is low income, they shouldn't keep their pet or whatever, because they're seeing and feeling the stories. And I think that's so important to get out there and kind of dispel some of what people think are not good homes. They don't need to go to the shelter. You know, they get euthanized. They need to stay there. And so thank you for what you're doing, and we're hoping to continue to advance. And we pay for an office visit and recommend care credit, because those ones aren't necessarily at risk of going into the shelter, but we don't want suffering either. And so we will pay for an office visit to get them in front of someone to get the same, to mimic your answer.
What's your organization so we can all go watch your stories?
It's Care for Pets.
Care?
Care for Pets.
Number 4?
Nope.
Okay.
F-O-R-E. Yep.
Care for Pets.
Yep. Facebook.
Go learn how
Check
to
us
tell
out.
stories.
Thank you.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Hello, I have a question about your found animals fostering.
Yes.
So if an animal comes in and somebody tells us, hey, we found this dog or cat, and it has a microchip, what do you do? Do you
If
take
they're
the
standing
animal
in my
or-
lobby, I'm running the chip to find the owner. Calling, Google search, whatever the other, is it in our database in Chameleon, and trying to get a hold of the owner right then and there. There's some conflicting, and I'm not sure what you guys do, the way you handle it, but there's some conflicting concerns as to whether that owner's information should be given to the person, or do you take the finder's information and hope that you can get in touch with the owner? I'm of the opinion that if somebody finds my pet, I don't care if they know where I live or what my phone number is. I want to be contacted by whomever, however, as soon as possible. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
Yeah, usually what we'll do is we will, if our finder is engaged in the idea of reuniting that pet with its owner, we're going to have a conversation with the owner and see if they're okay with us releasing their information.
What if you can't get a hold of them?
Well, if we can't get a hold of them, we essentially have two options. We can still engage the finder in a conversation around taking the animal back home. We can give them whatever supplies they need to a certain extent to keep that animal safely in their home while we follow up with trying to contact the owner. Or the finder can leave it at our shelter, and then we'll continue to work very diligently to get that animal back home. We may even turn it over to our animal protection team to do a little bit of more extensive research. Like if we have, let's say we have an address, maybe we don't even have a chip, we have an address, but we don't have a good phone number. We'll get into our numerous databases that our field services folks have access to, and we'll track down folks that way. And we try to minimize, if the animal stays with us, we try to minimize their stay.
I'll tell you, one of the things we're learning too is keep in mind people don't answer their cell phone if it's an unknown number or if it's a city number. Send them a text. You know, our animal control officer is doing the tag list now, and they type a text via email, and it's amazing how many people respond to that. I had a guy a few weeks ago, a month ago, whatever, there's a bunch of loose sheep. We called every number. We thought it was somebody else's goats, and nobody
Okay,
responded.
wait, were they sheep or goats?
They were actually sheep. But the guy whose goats I thought they were wouldn't respond to voicemails and that, and I finally sent him a text, said, look, I'm going to impound your sheep for your goats, because I thought they were his. It's going to cost you a lot of money. And he called me right back. Not only were they not his sheep or his goats, he came and helped us catch them. So it really worked out well.
Oh, nice.
But it was that text that got the attention, you know, and so keep that in mind, keep up with technology. You know, the same way you guys respond to things is how the rest of the public is too. So if you're not going to answer your phone to unknown calls or block calls, why would we expect other people to? They don't know their pet's gone half the time, their work.
If you're sending a text via email, don't you need to know like who their
You have to know the
provider is?
carrier. There's a bunch of free websites you can go to and get all the carrier, what you need to have the email address
Important
at.
to
Our
know.
dispatch just has it, and so do our
So do you
officers.
guess?
No, you can search the
The
cell
phone number will say who the carrier
Yep.
is. See, I learned something.
And what is your response to people who say that people who are looking for their pet aren't going to be looking, they're going to come to the shelter to look for them?
We do found reports. So they're in we use Chameleon, so they're in our database, they're in our website. If the finder brings the pet to us and then takes it back, we take a picture while they're there. If the finder calls us and keeps it at their house, we encourage them to email a photo in to us. We have a lost and found, we have a found pets map, so it has all the strays and finder reports on like an actual GIS map, so people can look in their neighborhoods at pets that were found. I think there's,
And most people don't look for their pet at the shelter.
Yeah.
That's why we're all here.
I mean, we don't have 80% return to owner rates.
Right.
Yeah, and we do the same as Pima. We do found reports. They go on our website. Somebody can search. If they happen to go to our website to look for their lost pet, they can search for it just like they would a animal in a kennel at our facility. And then all the rest of the things that Sarah mentioned.
Also, I'm going to try and use this later to get some money, but Paw Boost, has anybody here heard of Paw Boost? They're currently in the process of trying to recruit shelters to use their services. They're, as of right now, not interested in money at all, just solely interested in reuniting pets. And so they operate in some of the big city lost and found Facebook groups. They automatically generate like flyers that people can print. They do a lot of proactive things that make it easier for people who lost or found pets to get the word out.
This isn't a question, it's more of a suggestion that we did, because we were running into that issue too, as far as releasing owner information. And so something that completely changed for not only our animal control officers, but our front staff, was during adoption or microchip, because we do give away like free microchips and stuff occasionally, we actually ask them when they're filling out their paperwork, can we release your information if your pet is found? And that has made a huge difference, because we have it, A, in writing that you've given us permission, and B, our animal control officers right there and then can see in the computer. We use PetPoint, so it's able to say like, yes, this person relinquished, or allowed you to release information.
Right.
So we can now give that to the finder, and it's out of our hands.
And Chameleon has that field that's like do not contact or do not email or something like that.
And that's just another way, that you're being creative and taking out a barrier. And that's one of the things we're constantly looking at, is what's getting in our way of getting these animals back to where they need to go. So good for you, finding a way around that.
Yeah. One of the things that I've never worked for a city municipal shelter, so one of the things I find really interesting is they briefly mentioned databases that they have access to. So you guys want to talk about that a little bit? Because as a county facility, I don't have anything like that. I have like property owner tax information, but that's not really useful.
Mark can talk about that.
Well, sometimes the tax property owner information is useful if you can't get a hold of whoever's renting that property. But our dispatch has access to municipal, like water, electric, all that kind of stuff. So the municipalities having access to that, we can look up if it's a rented property, an owned property, whoever's paying the water bill, electric bill, garbage bill, whatever at that address, we can look that up and see who it is. So if a dog was picked up at, 302 3rd Avenue, we don't have a good phone number, we can see who's paying the bill there. And again, email or text, a lot of city departments have email to all these people who are paying their bills, so that's another easy way to find out who lives there, who's paying the bills anyway. Another one in the back there.
I'm very jealous of that, by the way.
Yeah, the other option is sheriff's dispatch. If they've had calls there, to an address, they'll have a history there.
I just thought of a question that's kind of a devil's advocate here, so bear with me. If someone brought in an animal and, that they found, and then it was, it was sent back with the finder. And something happened to it when it was in the possession of the finder, and then the owner says, hey, they brought it here and you didn't take it, you didn't protect it, and now look what happened. Is that ever a risk of sending it back with a finder?
I think it's always a risk, but, and it happens once in a while. I had a lady out in my neighborhood offered to keep an animal overnight. I'd pick it up in the morning if she didn't find the owner, and I showed up in the morning and they were looking for it. Owner eventually did find the dog, but you know, it's one of those things, weigh the balance, you know, what's more important. Like April has said, you know, you bring the dog into the shelter, there's a chance it's going to get sick.
Or escape from the shelter,
Right.
or...
Well, that doesn't happen with us.
Well, that's nice. Ever?
You know, we had a guy the other day try to steal a dog. So, you know, you never know.
Did you
And
encourage
so, yeah, well, if you steal one, you got to steal two. But again, it's a conversation they need to have, and as the Pet Resource Center is having that conversation, if it sounds like they're not going to be able to handle the animal, you know, they're probably not going to push that so much. You know, if you've got a petite person coming in with a very large dog that's pulling and jumping all over and they look overwhelmed, the Resource Center staff is probably not going to recommend they take that animal home if they can't handle it. So again, that's that conversation that we have. And if you were to go into the Austin Resource Center, you know, there's a lot of conversations going on. It's a very dynamic situation. It seems really busy and overwhelming, but there's a lot of exchange of information and idea sharing going on every day, all day long. So they're helping people make good informed decisions. We're not just pushing them out the door with a crate and a bowl of dog food saying, hey, good luck. You know, they're having real conversations with them, and that's important.
Yeah, and we're trying to apply the same litmus test that we apply to our animal owners in the field, which is if we provide them with enough information or the right resources, are they going to continue to do right by this animal? And so if there ever is a concern that that animal's not going to be safe, then that's going to be an animal that's in need of sheltering services. So we certainly have the ability through that conversation to help figure out and guide what happens with that animal.
On the flip side, if my dog were ever to be brought into the shelter, he would be very unsafe there, right? He would be more likely to injure himself or injure a person there than he ever would in a house. So,
I just wanted to add on one thing with microchips that have dead phone numbers at the end of them. We've had a lot of luck with Facebook and finding the owners on Facebook and messaging them, and then I can tell who all their family members are on Facebook and messaging all of them, and we've gotten a lot of pets home through that means. So that's been helpful.
I've had where I Facebook searched a phone number and it showed up on a business that was closed, but the owner still was on the Facebook page as the owner of the business or worked at the business or something, and that was how I ended up finding the person who owned the pet.
Talking to the mic. I just wanted to add, sorry, I've also been able to research people through True People Search.
True People Search.
Yeah. It'll show a list of associates and emails, and they're not always 100%, you're taking a gamble if it's actually that person, but I've had success with it. So.
Awesome.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you everyone for coming. Another round of applause.
Thank you.